right, so welcome everybody to today's lunch and learn. We are very excited today to have Dolly Sullivan come talk to us about building a private practice. So I'm going to let her tell you guys a little bit more about herself in a minute, but some logistical stuff first. I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet, so if you can sign in just with your name and let us know that you're here. That'll be great. And I'm also going to pass around evaluation forms. So if you can take one and then just if you can fill one out before you leave today and just bring it back to me. You don't need to put your name on it or anything like that. Just gives us some nice feedback about the seminars. And that's all the business stuff. So we are recording this meeting through Zoom. So be aware that it's not recording any of you, but your voices will be on there. It's going to be Dolly, so she's on this. I'm going to bribe. What's that? The no bribery material. Exactly. So I'm going to let Dolly is a social worker, and she does a lot of other stuff. She's also very involved in NASW, so I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you more about all of the wonderful things she does, and we really appreciate her coming today. So thank you for taking your time.
So, hi. Thanks for being here. I'm glad there's interest in the topic, or at least maybe something for spending free time doing. My name is Dolly Sullivan. I'm officially not hyphenated anymore. I am a clinical social worker and consultant. I have a private practice aimed at intentional wellness consulting. And the name came from, I opened shop, it was 2 years in July. And the name came from an epiphany I had at a board meeting, board retreat. I am a board member of the Sullivan Center for Good Life, and we were all talking about the concept of behaving intentionally, and it was all surrounding, of course, the organization and what we were going to be doing next. And I was kind of in a chapter of my work at the time where I was debating on whether it was time for a change, time to do something different. And it was funny because so much of what was happening in that discussion was pointing to behaving and deciding intentionally, and it just hit me that I wasn't living intentionally, like not just from a like a board member standpoint, but it just occurred to me like, oh my God, you're not living intentionally anymore, and I didn't really have any other words for it but that. And then on the drive home from Parkersburg, I decided, okay, I'm going to wait for my birthday in a few days, and I'm going to make my birthday gift to myself, filing with the Secretary of State, and building my own business. And I really had nothing else to go on with that. So I'm probably not the one to talk about the traditional way of going about starting a private practice or the traditional way of arriving to that conclusion, but I am really grateful that I did, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about why I made the decision I made and what the costs and benefits are of having a private practice versus working for a traditional behavioral health clinic or agency or hospital, what have you. But just to give you a little bit about my background, I am an alum of the MSW and MPA program here at WVU. Graduated in 2004 after doing the degree program. Incidentally, after that, was hired on as faculty at School of Social Work as a senior lecturer, and spent 4 years working on developing efforts on campus and around the local and state community with regards to dialogue and deliberation, and really using our skills as social workers to bring communities to the table to make difficult decisions about difficult issues, whatever that might be, and really invested in the interests of helping communities, whether it was the university community, whether it was the social work MSW program community, whatever, and really start to realize the social capital and what they had to offer to their own community by way of just communicating with each other about our own needs. And So really focused on that effort, built a program that studied in Northern Ireland, the peace process there, took students there for about 6 years, and studied the peace process, and it was just a really good study for social workers, whether you were more of a direct practice ilk or a macro practice ilk. It was just a really fascinating study on how communities really know what's best for them and what it takes to arrive at peace where you're not killing each other for generations. And so that was a real passion of mine and something I was really proud of and still to this day. That's my favorite work. Subsequently after that, I was, as much as I loved teaching and being in the classroom, because that was my biggest draw for becoming faculty, was because I love the classroom. I miss being a student, and I feel like when you're teaching, you're still students, and you're just professing what you're learning. And so I loved it, and I loved what I was doing, but I also missed the clinical piece of what I really was studying social work for. I did the public administration program because I was really interested in administration. I was really interested in the public sector and the nonprofit sector, and so it built my passions there, but clinically the social work program built my passions. So in my mind, long term, I really did want to be a clinical social worker, working with individual couples and families, and I missed it. And so while I had that, it was my experience of the internship, and loved it. But again, I missed it, and so I kind of passively was on the market, just not really very intentional. And again, just kind of looking to see what was out there, and lo and behold, an opportunity came up across campus at WVU Children's Hospital, the School of Medicine. They were hiring a family therapist for Children's Hospital to help do both psychiatric consultations and pediatric palliative care support for kids with life-limiting and life-threatening. And so it was the first time they had ever devoted money from their budget, foundation budget, towards the child and family's mental health. So that wowed me, and I had no interest or desire to work in a hospital setting. But the fact that a rural hospital, even though with a flagship university, I feel like it should go without saying that they would invest in something like that. At the same time, it was pretty progressive to do such a thing with their money. In the culture, when I say culture, I don't mean West Virginia culture, I mean American culture that sees behavioral health and physical health as two separate entities, which we know it's not. And so I just was really excited by the fact that they were doing it, applied, and I got the position. I was there for 8.5 years and loved it. And it was, without a doubt, would go down as my best work. I mean, it was, I just can't say enough about the work that I was doing. But, working with dying children and families day-to-day basis is taxing. And while I feel like I learned how to do self-care, working in an environment like that, after 8.5 years, it was but I really wasn't interested in just kind of waiting around for the right job to pop up again. And so I just thought, private practice was something I was always interested in. And not research retreat, but that board retreat just kind of brought it all together. And then I was starting the groundwork for starting a private practice. And then I resigned at WVU Children's Hospital in June, and I launched the practice in July 2016. So that's kind of my background in terms of what brings me here. And I do a lot of other things in between that I will be able to incorporate in this conversation, just to kind of help you see that private practice isn't necessarily just reserved for behavioral health work. Does that make sense? And so I actually named my practice Essential Wellness Consulting because I have a very high interest in using knowledge towards consulting, and we'll talk more about what that means in a little bit, because I have that So I want to tell you a little bit about what I think, and I'll be curious what your all's thoughts are. Whether you've practiced it all yet, or whether you're embarking on it after your graduate work, or just people you know in your professional network. I'm very interested in hearing what you all have to say. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit after 2 years of being on my own, and 8.5 years prior to that doing clinical work within an organization. What I feel like the cost of benefits have been so far. But before I go on, I am just curious, for those of you who are here, how many of you are aiming to practice for clinical standpoint? So, okay, so most of you, and those of you who did not raise your hand, just tell me quickly what you're aiming to your scope of practice. Okay, possible work, like care management. Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
If the hospital setting is a direct practice, I mean, that's what I'm planning on going.
Hospital, it is definitely direct practice. The divide between clinical practice, clinical direct practice, and direct practice in a hospital setting would be that I did 0 case management as a social worker in a hospital. I did absolutely no case management, and anytime anyone asked me to, I was on the verge of tears, because those men and women are absolute anchors in any hospital setting. So, and I wouldn't know if there was like an immediate shortage for some reason, and they just saw it and told you after my name, and they're like, Dolly, we need you to fill in. I would have done this, because it's just a different line of work altogether. You make the hospital stay possible, and you make discharge possible. Is what I see care managers at hospitals. You are the liaison between every member of that healthcare team and that family, not just in the building, not just in-house, but when they're gone. Okay, and so it's very direct practice. It's very one-on-one. It looks like an attest to that. Case management in Paramount for a number of years. Yeah, I mean, you guys are the frontliners. I think the challenge right now, and if you guys are ever interested in kind of talking about this as an aside, I'd be happy to. But the challenge today, and the people who watch this later might have something to say about this, depending on who's watching. But the challenge today that I see in the healthcare setting, not just medical, but in the healthcare setting from a care management standpoint, is that we're starting to see more and more nurses fill that role. And while that is not necessarily a bad thing, particularly from the in-house piece to the puzzle, because nursing, there's a lot of aspects of nursing that needs to be a part of that care management process and that liaison work while a patient and their family are in-house. There's no question. But my concern with this influx of more nurses and social workers filling that role, I do worry about the psychosocial component that nurses don't get unless they take an elective social work class while they're in school. That's missing. And that's a big piece of it, because that's not just with regards to in-house, that's within. So that concerns me. So I'm really glad to hear that that's an interest of yours. We need more social care.
Now, were you outpatient?
No, I was inpatient. I did do, in order to get my clinical supervision, the Department of Pediatrics at the School of Medicine bartered with the Department of Behavioral Medicine and Psychiatry so that I could get my clinical supervision, so I could get my LICSW, because that's what was required for the position, but I didn't have it yet because I spent the last 4 years in academia. So I did do outpatient individual and family therapy at Chestnut Ridge in the Department of Behavioral Medicine and Psychiatry for 2 years while I got my supervision. And then once the supervision was complete, I got my license, the deal was off, so to speak, and I was full-time pediatrics. So that was all inpatient. And so anytime there was a kid that came in with questions of psychiatric issues, I would jump onto the consult team from behavioral medicine and be a part of that evaluation, be a part of the intervention thing. And then anytime a child was diagnosed with a level of so I covered the pregnant women who were with us for preterm labor, and they were allowed to go home for 3 months for the duration of their pregnancy. I worked with them just to help them keep their sanity. I worked with kids that had attempted suicide. I worked with families in the neonatal intensive care unit that had their baby, 21 weeks into their pregnancy, and all of the complications that come with that, to a new cancer diagnosis, to a diving accident. So all of my work after my first 2 years of fall inpatient, and just helping families juggle with the stress of the acute situation, but also decision making. So does that help?
I
yeah.
work for Ruby, that's why I was asking.
Oh, do you? Okay, yeah. What department are you in?
Right now I'm part-time, just in the building office, but I was cervical pathology.
Oh, okay.
Up on 5.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so I was only on 6. And the only time I would leave the floor is if, say, a family really needed some help from someone like me over in the outpatient setting at the physician office center, and they would page me and be like, but other than that, I never left. So that's a little bit about my background and history and experience. And one of the pieces that I'm really grateful for in terms of my experience at WVU Children's Hospital was it opened up a scope of practice for me that I never really had entertained or really found myself interested in at all, which was end of life care. I mean, palliative care, end of life is certainly a part of palliative care, but it's a part of a bigger spectrum. And so, grief work, bereavement, those types of behavioral health issues were never really something that occurred to me. But I'm really grateful that it did, because there's so few people who are interested in doing it. And I think largely it's because we live in a culture that's super uncomfortable with acute medical crisis and or death, right? So it just was not something that I had thought about. And really, unless you have an interest in that already and you know it and you're interning at hospice, not very many people would have been the wiser, and I certainly didn't. And so it just really opened up my scope of practice in a way that I could not have even imagined until having done it. And so, and it opened my eyes to a whole other aspect of trauma, the PTSD, and the trauma that happens to parents, the child patient themselves, to their siblings, to their grandparents, to everybody involved. And so it really, really just was a gift for me, professionally, in terms of growing me. And so what I will say, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty, is that I think there is a big draw. There was a big draw about 15, 20 years ago, and then it kind of faded for a little bit. Now there's a big draw again about private practice for social workers. And again, I'm going to tell you what I think the benefits and costs of that are. But just as from one professional to another, and as a total stranger to another, like it would be, I feel like I would be neglectful to you as young peers to not say that it would have been a huge mistake. And there was a draw at one point. Had I not gotten so interested in the dialogue of liberation work at WVU, school social work, I wanted to get my 2 years in and start a practice, because the flexibility behind it was so good. But it would have been a great mistake, because again, the time and the energy that I spent working in behavioral medicine, getting my supervision, and being in that environment, being around seasoned clinicians, was a gift. The same holds true for my time in Children's Hospital. It was a gift as well, because again, like not only was I teaching mental health, but I was learning more about it too, even though I was the only one of my kind in the entire hospital. There's no one else. Right now, there's no family therapist for all of Ruby. Big mistake. And since I left, they haven't replaced me. And I think there needs to be someone like what I was in both adult and, but nonetheless, hopefully that it's an investment that we make again in the future. But it would have been a real mistake for me to have started a private practice right after my supervision. And again, the biggest reason for that is the experience you get working in a traditional setting. and not just from a scope of practice and like kind of clinical growth standpoint, but just know-how standpoint. Like just knowing how the health system works. You're never really going to get that working alone in practice. You're only going to get a very minute picture of that part of healthcare if you don't really try to make a commitment to work in a traditional setting before you launch this thing profit. That's my opinion. And others might beg to differ, but I really do think that had I done what I originally planned to do, I would be a lesser therapist. That's just, I just don't think I would be as effective. And it would have taken me a lot of time to become as effective as I am now. That makes sense. So just, that's my 2 cents on that piece. Any questions real quick before I go on? Okay, any comments or thoughts on that, or that would be a question? Okay, so I just wanted to go in real quickly about what I saw as the benefits, both when I was kind of thinking about doing this in Parkersburg and now 2 years in. For me, the benefits are flexibility and the obvious flexibility of, scheduling, working the hours that you want to work, so on and so forth. But also keep in mind that, for as flexible as it is to have your own practice, you are providing a customer service. And so while you might like to just work 9 to 5, a lot of people can't leave their own jobs to leave for a 1-hour therapy session or a 90-minute therapy session and go back to work without taking vacation time and so on and so forth. So, one of the realizations I had was, it's important to have evening hours. And that was not a part of my original plan. And but again, I still have a level of flexibility behind a higher level of flexibility behind what my week looks like than I would typically if I worked in a traditional mental health setting. But some people would say, well, that would make me nervous, or I don't think I like that level of flexibility. I really like a routine. I really like to be told where to be when. I really like to know when I need to show up. You know what I mean? And if that's the case, in a traditional setting, it's really good for you, and it was good for me at the time. And it would still be good for me now. It's just my needs and my desires as a professional and my personal needs have changed. So when I say flexibility, yes, sure, flexibility with regards to my schedule, the number of hours I work per week, so on and so forth. That's absolutely true. But not just flexibility in my time, but flexibility in my clinical work. When you work in an organization, just organically, if not purposefully, deliberately, organically, organizations typically do develop clinical philosophies over time, based on who all's there, right? And that's a good thing. Like you want to be around people who are like-minded and who you can, review cases with and so on and so forth, and not looking through like 3 eyeballs. But what I mean by clinically is just I have more flexibility clinically because while I'm bound by the traditional approach to providing therapy, I'm not necessarily bound in how I offer it. And what I mean by that is that I can kind of wiggle in and out of typical norms, so to speak, of a sequence of seeing someone from start to finish that you can't really do in a traditional setting. And I think my pace clinically is different than when I'm working in a traditional setting, because in a traditional setting, there's a real drive for numbers. There's a real drive for getting people in, getting people out. Insurance plans are much more friendly to the brief intervention approaches, so on and so forth. All still what I do, but I still, and it's hard for me to put it into words, but I still feel like my pace as a clinician is there is a little bit more just clinical freedom in how I approach my clients. And the other benefit that I see in having a private practice consultancy is that it's an opportunity for me to really maximize all of my knowledge, skills, and abilities that in ways that I couldn't do in a traditional setting, whether that was at the hospital, whether that was at whether I worked, in a typical behavioral health clinic, whether I worked in behavioral medicine, whether I worked in children's hospital. I think I have a lot of abilities that I got both naturally, but also through my education, that because I was hired for this position, I couldn't use my other skills the way that I thought could be beneficial for the organizations that I was working for prior to starting private practice. So what I mean by that is that, I really like writing. I really like program development. I really like the classroom. I like opportunities to share what I've learned. I really like, so when you're just hired for this position, they're not really interested in the rest of what you have to offer. Typically. I mean, you might have some organizations that are progressive enough and understand the need, well, in my mind, if I were an administrator of any organization, I would see that there was a value-added proposition to see all of my employees as more than just the job description. But most organizations don't operate that way, for better or worse. And so as a result, everybody just gets in their kind of cookie-cutter grind. And so when person A comes to administrator and says, hey, listen, I've been noticing these things, we're kind of giving some hiccups from a system standpoint, or I've been noticing, I think that there might be ways we could do this more efficiently and effectively and get more return on investment, more bang for our buck with less, manpower, whatever your sentiments are. More often than not, you're going to get the, okay, great, thanks. And if you, and so then if you're just like, okay, well, I'll just take the bull by the horns, then you run the risk of pissing people off, and so, and that's a big piece of what I experienced, because I could just see, again, when you're in a medical setting, you're working in a medical model, you're not working in a social work model, so put your seatbelt on. Because you're not going to be working in the social work model of practice. You're going to be working in the medical model, and so you're going to have to find ways to make it work and maintain your sanity and your passion without getting burnt out. So, so I would just kind of see things that might go just a little smoother, or go a little better, or maybe it's good for these people to be a team because they're all kind of trying the same things, or so that's the kind of flexibility I'm talking about that I see as a benefit to going into private practice and starting consultancy, was because while I am very passionate and enjoy and filled by my clinical work, there are also other things that I'm very passionate about that I still think I have something to offer. Whether it's an individual that says, hey, I just looking for coffee, which is things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit, but I'm not sure. I know you know about this stuff, but can we get together? Well, if I worked in a traditional setting, my discretionary time to be able to do such a thing is pretty minimal at best. Where now I can say, oh my God, yeah, I'd love to. Let's sit together for 2 hours, bring your lunch, come to the office, we'll sit down, I want to hear what you're up to, we'll go from there. And I just, I feel like so that's another area of flexibility that I'm referencing. That beyond clinically, I just feel like I have the opportunity to really maximize and make use of most, if not all, of my skills and training. The other benefit is, next to schedule, next to my kind of clinical approach and pace, maximizing my skills and training. The other benefit that I see over the last 2 years is I do have a higher income potential than I had working for a traditional healthcare setting. Um, you know, because if you're working within an organization that has a food chain this high, and you're here doing your practice, you know, if you were to break down your salary by the hour in a 52-week year, what you earn, if you're really looking at your per hour time and energy investment, I will earn more being on my own because the payment all comes to my practice. Whereas while your services will be billable where most of you land, the bill gets paid by the insurance or whatever out-of-pocket payer and paid the hospital. So your salary isn't cut of that or paid to, you know, whatever organization. And so for me, that was another perk was realizing that my income earning potential actually did increase. Now, that can also be a false statement if you have chosen to be a solo practitioner with office rent of $1,200 a month, and you have all the bells and whistles with your software, billing, blah, 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 then you might make less than what you make in a traditional social work position. Who knows? But for me, my income earning potential is higher than when I worked in traditional positions. So, well, that's yes and no. It really depends on, you know, like how much overhead you're creating for yourself. You know, and so in the beginning, you know, you're going to be living paycheck to paycheck, so to speak. You know, because you're going to want to make sure that everything that you initially invested in is paid for. You know, whether that is your Secretary of State business license all the way to your office furniture, right? You know, to getting your landline or your fax machine, getting, you know, so I paid for internet, fax, and landline. I paid for office rent. I paid for business card. I paid for logos to be on my office door. I paid for. So in the beginning, the investment is pretty hefty. You have to be prepared for that. But if you do enough of your math homework, you can kind of plan for that. And I do know what a lot of folks do is a lot of folks start practices just on the side where they're doing 6 or 8 hours a week, like co-renting office space. Like you might come to me later and say, hey, listen, I'm really interested in, but I'm not really at a place to rent my own office space, get my own landline, get my own fax machine, blah, blah, blah. Is there any time that you're not in your office that I could rent from you? Or, you know, whatever. Like I know that you're not in your office on Saturdays, but it'd be okay if I consult your 4 clients every Saturday. The next while, you know, so I do know a lot of people, and I actually co-rented for the first year and a half. I just moved in my own office in June. Look at Elizabeth, because she's a good friend of mine. So,
Yes,
yeah, I lose track of time. But it was June. I moved into my own office. So I had been co-renting with actually a graduate peer of mine who graduated a year later than me from the NSWMPA program. And she had office space in Morgantown and she had office space in Fairmont. I like the idea of kind of branching out in Fairmont because not everybody wants to drive to Morgantown. Not everybody likes the hustle and bustle, looking for parking, blah, blah, blah. You know, and so it really kind of opened my market a little bit for a while, but my personal circumstances changed to the point where it just didn't make sense to be 25 miles away, or, you know, like 3 times a week. So when Shannon wasn't in her office in Morgantown, I was. When she wasn't in the office in Fairmont, I was. You know, and so that's how I managed. So I paid a fraction for office rent, and I would pay, you know, and I'm still paying a fraction comparatively because there's a lot of great new office spaces right now. I mean, beautiful office spaces, but you're going to pay an arm but I pay a fraction of what most my peers in private practice pay, and I think I have the best deal for it.
Where is your office?
On High Street. Yep, I'm on the 8th floor of the Lawn Building, and literally, I think I have the best view of town. Right? I really do. It didn't really hit me until I was in there. Say again. Yeah, so I worked March through June. So there's multiple steps that you need to take. That things that I didn't even know about. I mean, if it hadn't been, for Shannon, I would have been at a real loss. Because she had just done it 8 years before that, and so she was just a real gift to me, and that's what we have to do for each other. So hopefully I'll have the opportunity to pay it forward someday. But so I started in March, and in order for me to really register anything with anything, I needed a business. And so that's the first thing I did. And then after that, I claimed my NPI number, my national provider administrator number, which once you start practicing anywhere, you will have an NPI number, you just won't know it. And I had no idea that every individual practitioner had one until I needed to know what my NPI number was. So there's a whole kind of process around that. And then I needed to, figure out, was I just going to be doing business as Dolly or Sullivan, or was I going to name my practice? Well, I wanted to name my practice because I was in hopes that maybe someday I would grow enough to either hire more clinicians or more consultants. So I didn't want to be doing business as Dolly. So there's just a whole lot of little details that you need to kind of work out in your head over the first few months before you even open shop. If that makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot, and I can come back and I can do step 1 through 50 million for you if you want. I can certainly do that. But that takes me to the costs, right? It's not just the financial cost of your initial investment in startup, but the cost is you do everything. I'm the secretary, I'm the scheduler, I'm the custodian, I'm the clinician, the consultant. I'm everything. I'm bookkeeper. And so that comes at a huge cost to me, because it's not like a lot of the things that come with having a private practice are things that I would rather not be using my time doing. I hate charting. I hate billing. And when you work for a traditional setting, you're charting, but you're not having to worry about the claims that get denied by Blue Cross or Medicaid or PEIA, or you know what I mean? You're not having to, because I can blow a good 3 or 4 hours on the phone just dealing with the claim glitch. And that's 3 or 4 hours I didn't get paid. Didn't schedule a client during my administrative time to work this out. I get something in the mail, or I see an electronic filing gets denied, and I have no idea why, because I knew I did it right, blah, 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 blah. Then I have to look into my next week or the rest of my week to see when I can fit into the administrative time, blow a couple hours on making it right. And it's the least favorite part of what I do. Which is the other cost too, because if I'm not doing my billing on time, at least on time, and that's the flexibility perk too, is that I can decide how often I want to get paid in terms of, developing a sequence for when I submit claims. Do I want to pay at the end of a month and just do all of my claims in one batch, and then in a couple weeks get paid in lump sums, or do I want to, this, that, and the other? And so everybody has to make that decision based on their financial requirements and what makes sense for your personal, household insanity. But, for me, it's easy for me to get behind in billing, because it's the least favorite part of what I do. And so, I'm getting paid now for stuff that I did 3 months ago, because I just hate it that much. And I'm it'll be there. But you do run you run the risk of making insurance companies mad and saying, we don't pay people after this many days out of service, so on and so forth. And so, those are all the little things that you have to learn over time that you wouldn't have known otherwise. Because if you're working for a traditional setting, all those things are taken care of, right? So, so that's, for me, that's a big cost. One of the costs of having months after I started practice. Just another reason clearly why I started practice. But that being said, like you still need a caregiver when I'm at work or outside of the house. Got the leak stove on, can't be left alone just yet. Things. So, you know, so I don't only manage my schedule, I manage his schedule, and I manage our caregiver's schedule. You know, and so that's a full-time job in and of itself. I easily, between managing his care, both from a in our home standpoint, doctor's appointments, prescriptions, claims that I know are bogus because we paid our deductible, blah, 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 like that, I easily can invest a good 30, 35 hours a week in that alone. So you imagine, now I'm also a business owner. You know, so you really have to figure out how it's going to fit your life. And eventually, as the practice grows, but I don't foresee that being for another 5 or 7 years, I'd like to hire someone to help me with those things. But until then, it is mine. Right? So that's a big cost that a lot of people are not up for or interested in. And that's fair. If all of you after today, just from that alone, were like, yeah, I thought it was kind of cool, I'm not going to do it. Support you 110%. I would support you 110%. But for me, the benefits outweigh the cost. You know, the other cost, the billing piece, and the other piece that I think people do think mention sometimes, but also often gets lost in the other costs of having a private practice is the law of you know, like that's the one benefit of working in an organization is that even though you might have colleagues or peers that you don't necessarily like or get along with to the best degree, there is something to be said about being stuck or being concerned or confused about something and being able to walk down to the next office and, you know, to have thoughts of something else. I don't have that. You know, so it can be a really lonely approach to your professional life. Can be really, you know, and so the onus then, if I miss that, if I miss the camaraderie, if I miss being able to go down the hall and say, hey, you want to do lunch? Or, hey, I have this real weird situation, can we talk about it? If, you know, if that is something that I miss, then the onus then, in order to minimize the loneliness that comes with having a private practice, then the onus is on me to put myself out there and reach out. And that's just right now, like in my mind, prior to Raleigh's stroke, I just had in my head, okay, like as soon as I get up and running and established, I want to do an open house, I want to meet other folks in private practice, I want to reconnect with people in other organizations so that they know I can be a referral source to them, so on and so forth. I really want to try to get a group of people that I can grow with, who are also in private practice or not, to have lunch with once a month or this, that, and the other. All completely appropriate thoughts and approach to private practice. None of what I can do right now. I just don't have that level of discretionary time. So if I'm someone who needs a lot from others in my professional walk, I would not be able to do private practice right now. You know, I am a social butterfly, but I also like working alone. If that makes sense. And so I'm fed by both. So I feel like I cope with the what I see as temporary loneliness pretty well right now. And some other people just really would not be very happy. And that makes sense to me. So for me, those are the biggies. Those are the big benefits, and those are the bigger costs that I see. And there's always little things in between that come up, and that I'm probably not thinking about until I'm like in that moment. But those are the things that and again, I'm only 2 years in. I know I have a lot to learn, and I know that, you know, if I did this in a year from now with you again, I might have a whole other list of costs and benefits to share. You know, I'm sure I would, but for right now, like that's what I see as being the biggies. Any other thoughts? I don't know. I mean,
What's like the job outlook for like the case management? Like, will you be
from a care management standpoint nationwide is it's definitely more nurse heavy than it used to be the other way around. Okay, but I also know that they are high demand jobs that often end up with a lot of turnover, not because the organization's a bad one, but because it's a hard work. And so rarely would you find an organization filled to the gills and have maximized their care management lines. I just would be shocked if I happened into one of the former administrators or one of the administrators that I used to work with that led the care management ship over at Ruby and told me like, yeah, we're full, we're not taking anybody, because it's a high turnover job because it's a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot of demand in that work, and not that there isn't in clinical practice, but I would find it hard to imagine that you would find it difficult to find a job in a care management position, and I would find it hard to imagine that you would find it difficult to find a job in a therapist position because the need is so vast. There's just so much need, and and I remember my husband and I when we were talking about me making this decision and us making this decision and pressing forward. I can remember him saying like, I just feel like there's so many people in private practice. Like, do you think that there's enough market? Blah, 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 blah. Like, do you think that it's saturated right now? And I'm like, oh yeah, the market's certainly saturated, but it doesn't meet the need. I mean, you can't have a 6-month waiting list for a therapist at Chestnut Ridge or Wedgewood or any of the biggies in town, and then find and then try to send someone to your private practice peer across the town that does what you don't, and you're trying to make a good referral, and they're like, yeah, I'm not taking patients. Like, I mean, the need is so huge. I mean, and that doesn't even count the reality that the people who should be in therapy aren't yet. So the better we get at mental health literacy, the more demand there's going to be. I mean, we're crap for that as a culture. So when the cat gets out of the bag some way, somehow, because we're all really banging the doors of people, you can't have good physical health without good emotional health, and you can't have good emotional health without good physical health. When that reality finally hits the right brain, you think the need's bad now. Wow. Yeah, so I know there's a lot of trepidation on job hunting and securing positions, and maybe you find it a slower process to secure a clinical position or a care management position right here in Morgantown. Because we are a saturated community, I still don't think that would be the case, but even if that were true, you think that they don't need us in Harrison County? Think they don't need us in Taylor County? You think they don't need us? I mean, we're a 55 county state, 97% of us rural. So, and now with telemedicine and telemental health on the horizon, like my practice management software that I chose did not have it 2 years ago as an option for me. They just started it about 2 months ago, and I haven't even tapped into the webinars to learn more about that yet. But once I have the time and energy to do that, you better believe I'm going to try to help people in Logan. We don't have anybody within a 35-mile radius. So the need is huge. The need is huge. And so, I really, it kind of falls on deaf ears for me when people worry about finding a job, because if you're in social work, we need your help. It doesn't matter what your scope is. I mean, this is a jacked up society, right? Like, we need social workers out there. And that's the thing too, is that I don't think, like, when I say part of the purpose for me in choosing private practice is that it allows me to really maximize my skills. I mean, there are ways that I can help communities, individuals, organizations, and families outside of my clinical practice, all of which I got from my graduate and undergraduate education and my natural talents, and so, the onus is on me, if I have the good fortune of being able to do it in private practice, is to try to do what I can to maximize my skills to affect the best change, right? So don't forget that if you're interested in working in a hospital setting and being a care manager, don't forget about your other knowledge, skills, and abilities, that you might be able to do a little something on the side. You know, I feel confident that I could go to any hospital and help them start a pediatric palliative care program tomorrow. You know, I think I can help any nonprofit win the next best grant. I'm a good writer. I enjoy writing. I really like helping people whittle down on what their mission and vision is for this project. I'm a good project manager. You know, I just haven't had the time, given my personal circumstances, to put myself out there in that way. But now I can, when I'm able. Does that make sense? So don't forget that piece, no matter what your scope is, as you finish your graduate work and you start launching your social work practice and careers, that you have a lot to offer, and it doesn't necessarily have to be black and white, just the job that you applied and won. You know, like applied for and won, that you can do things on the side. You know, the other piece to that is, you know, being a board member of organizations that really need good leadership to fulfill their mission and vision. You know, that was a huge way I was able to use maximize my skills while I was in a traditional setting. And so there's a lot to think about, and I just encourage us, because there's so much demand for the training that we get and for the profiles that we are as people, that I hope that you'll think outside the box and you start thinking about what you're going to do with yourself.
Just if I may, as of Friday, just WV Medicine itself has 5 open care management positions, 3 clinical therapists, and then outpatient has 2 full-time clinical therapists, plus chemical supplemented outside facilities like Sharps and Harper's Ferry. So they're hiring and moving. They can't keep their roles out there. And that was just as of this Friday.
Yeah. You know, and I think WV Medicine, I think it was an awesome organization to work for. I'm so grateful I had the opportunity. They're a great organization to work for, and they're growing all over the state, because they see that it just all can't happen in Morgantown. And so they're finally, you know, breaking the bounds of the county lines and getting out there around the state. And so you're right. I mean, now that WV Medicine is really trying to cover the state as a service line, you know, that as an organization would be a lot of opportunities. So thanks for sharing that.
I just looked it up Friday because I'd keep track of the jobs.
Oh, yeah, good. I always
Yeah.
encourage people to stay on the market. Let know what's out there. You don't have to apply for anything. Just keep your hand on the pulse of what's going on, and you just never know. It's all about timing. You had a question back here that I want to.
Well, I just want to know, like, when you first decided to reference, how you got your clients, like, how you marketed yourself at the time. Because people, you just knew someone just for just hey, you need to refer someone to practice them my way, or like what?
I did. So I had the good fortune of building a good clinical network by working at the hospital. And so all of my physician friends, all of my care management friends, colleagues, all of my nurse friends and colleagues, like, I was able to tell them what I was doing when I left, that I would appreciate their referrals. I also made use of the school of social work, continuing and professional education listserv. So I put just a quick announcement out there, letting folks know that I was starting a private practice, solid potential wellness consulting, and that this was my scope and what my areas of interest were. And, you know, please feel free to send people my way. And because I was already in a clinical setting, and a non-traditional one at that, I was able to actually take some folks with me. Like, there were folks that, you know, like, I still see a married couple that lost their child in 2015, and they were really struggling with family planning thereafter. You know, she was traumatized. Now they.
So you didn't have to like just start completely with nobody.
No, I think. I mean, I think when I started, it was July 6th, And by the end of July, I had already had four new referrals. Yeah, and by, let's see, Raleigh had his stroke in October, and I want to say by early October, I already had 8 active, 6 or 8 active clients. And for most, the sequence typically is you would see them weekly, depending on what their situation is. Not everybody needs to be seen weekly right out of the chute, but, for those, I mean, and so that wasn't chump change coming in my first few months, My ultimate goal is to see between 16 and 21 clients a week. And if I did that, then I would easily be able to replicate my income from the hospital. And then some. So yeah, I think the important piece is that when you're comfortable going public with the information, because I didn't really go public with the information until June. There was just a handful of trusted colleagues and peers that knew that I was doing what I was about to do. So depending on your situation, you might say, well, I can go public a lot sooner, and you might have more time to build a referral base, quicker than I did. But, I think, and actually because of how quickly I was able to get referrals, it's a reminder to me how important it is to stay connected and build your professional network. I think if I had been someone really passive to that end, I think it would have been really hard.
So maybe we have time for maybe one quick question.
Yeah,
yes. Kind of relating to that, I just wanted to know, if you would suggest having a certain population that you're working with, or kind of being open. With your experience, you have resources that you could go and ask for referrals and stuff. Which kind of something I was thinking about is working in the field for a little bit to get that experience and then start
your network.
Yeah, and your network to then start something. But I just didn't know, do you open it to all different types of people and whoever needs the work, or do you kind of narrow it down to people a little more?
I think it's a very appropriate question, and I think it's person to person. I felt comfortable kind of honing in on the areas that I think I'm really pretty good at and what I'm really passionate about. And so for me, that is trauma, not just the classical cases of trauma, because I see trauma as a spectrum, and I see it more with brain injury than anything. And so I think trauma is highly underdiagnosed and undertreated by everyone in the mental health field, including social work. And so that's a real, my nickname is Trauma Lady in the hospital, because so much of what I diagnosed was trauma, but it was. They were just sick of hearing it because nobody loves to treat it. Or doesn't know what to do with it when they see it. So trauma I knew was something very important to me. Bereavement, adjustment, with loss, caregivers. I really got a bird's eye view of the experience of being a caregiver, not just being a parent, or not just being a grandparent, or not just being a sibling, but also being a caregiver of another family member, and now I'm living it myself. So I really felt like I had a pretty good leg up on peers that hadn't had that professional experience, and now I'm living it too. So I feel like that's really helpful. Anxiety, as someone who's always been an anxious about myself, I've had to really win over an anxiety disorder, and so I really enjoy working with folks who struggle with anxiety, whether it's primary or secondary to trauma. And I really enjoy working with couples. And in terms of a market that I feel like we don't talk about because we just don't identify them as a market, is healthcare professionals. That was a big part of my work at Children's Hospitals. I did on-site therapy with nurses, physicians, residents, CAs, MAs, everybody that needed support. And I think that we lose a lot of good social workers. I think we lose a lot of good nurses. I think we lose a lot of good physicians every year across the country that we really need because they don't have support. So.
find your passion.
So I really just, so that's been enough of an itch for me. It really has. Yeah, so and the truth is, I think the work that we do is taxing enough that I don't think I was capable of making it a free-for-all. Like, I just really need to reserve my energy for what I know I can do well. And, you know, I think it's worth, and time will tell, right? I mean, like, your time, your first couple of years, like, your first 2 or 3 years in clinical practice or in anything that you do, whether it's macro, micro, your first few years is really what's going to help you see where you thrive the most. And what's interesting is that the areas of mental health that I thrive in the most are not the areas of mental health that I had in my head that I was going to largely pursue. And it was just my professional experience that really drove that and changed it. So it's really interesting to see what happened. Just listening to that.
So I think we are going to have to stop because these guys have class, but I want to
Okay.
thank you, Dolly, for coming.
Hey,
This is
thanks.
great.
Good.
She will be, Dolly is going to be presenting again, anticipating our schedule on the 15th. She's going to be talking about addiction treatment, and then on November 5th about self-care.
Yes.
It's very, very important topic. So if you
Thanks for
guys
being here.
can, if you haven't filled out an evaluation, if you can take that and bring it up. And I also
please
have,
not only do that for Mary and the school, but please do that for me.
yes.
This is the first time I've done a talk on this topic. I talk on a lot of things, but this is the first one for this, so I'd really love to know what you would have liked to have more or less of. That helped me a lot.
Yep,
Thanks.
and we send all our presenters copies of the eval, so
Thanks.
people know.
Appreciate you.
You didn't get a chance to sign in, there's a sign-in sheet is up here.
Darlene.
Thank you.